Notre Dame's 2026 recruiting class is on the brink of a game-changing edition, and we've got the inside scoop. Recruiting insider Eric Thomas joins me to break down the latest on elite prospects like Rodney Dunham, the major influence of new running back coach Ja'Juan Seider, plus the strategy shift Notre Dame is using to make waves on the recruiting trail. That's next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. And today is Thursday, March 27th. Thanks for starting your day right here by making this your first listen of the day. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you to please subscribe if you are watching along on YouTube or subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. And today on the show, we got recruiting insider Eric Thomas from Irish Illustrated to break down the latest on Notre Dame football recruiting. This is a very important time on the recruiting calendar. Notre Dame just hosted a bunch of top targets on their visits, and they will continue to host more prospects throughout these next few weeks. And one of the prospects who was just on campus this past weekend, five-star defensive end Rodney Dunham. And the visit went so well, Dunham could be a part of Notre Dame's class of 2026 in the very near future. We'll talk about that, and we'll also dive into how new running backs coach Ja'Juan Seider is making a big impact on the recruiting trail, particularly with top target Javian Osborne. Plus, we'll get the latest updates on wide receiver recruiting and why things might actually be trending up for that position. First time in a long time I've been able to say that. And finally, we will discuss how Notre Dame's Pot of Gold Day set the stage for the class of 2027 and hear which early enrollee freshmen have made a strong first impression. Enjoy. All right, I'm joined once again by recruiting insider Eric Thomas from Irish Illustrated. And Eric, it feels like we actually have some good news to talk about for the first time in a long time. Let's start with the headline. Top 50 prospect Rodney Dunham, the five-star defensive end out of North Carolina, is fresh off his visit to Notre Dame and just announced his commitment date. Everything seems to be trending towards the Irish here. You just put in a crystal ball projection that he will pick the Irish. Why did you put that in?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me on again. And just on Dunham, coming out of the visit, I spoke with some sources in South Bend on Sunday night, and there was a lot of confidence about the move that they made. They felt that they had taken the lead. The question, and this may have been just the way I asked it, it was phrased about like this next segment of his recruiting cycle. And the way it was put to me was Notre Dame felt very confident that they were going to be able to close on Dunham in this next chapter, feeling that they had taken the lead. Heading out of last weekend's visit. Within 24 hours of that, I had connected with Tom Loy. He let me know that Dunham reached out to him, let him know that Notre Dame was in fact his top school and that there was discussion of the timeline moving up. Any recruiting fan knows anytime you come fresh off a visit and the timeline's moving up, it's a good sign. And then obviously within 24 hours of that, Dunham had his commitment date announced for April 10th. That's going to be with us at 247 at 4 p.m. Eastern on that day. Look, everything's trending for Notre Dame. He's not going to take other visits before the commitment. At least there's nothing scheduled right now. It's not the anticipation. And for Dunham, we knew going into the visit from speaking with sources around South Bend that the Irish felt confident about the move they could make in this visit in particular. When he was on campus last offseason, Notre Dame felt like they really connected with him. They felt that they had put themselves in a competitive place for him. And the biggest issue in the time thereafter was just he didn't get back to campus. So there was a little bit of a gap and maybe a little bit less top of mind for Notre Dame, status-wise for him. This visit changed that. They put them right back in the lead. I think that everything that he felt in that initial upfront visit that had us so excited about Notre Dame's chances with Dunham, about a year ago, I think that all just kind of came bubbling right back up to the surface, pretty much from the moment he stepped foot on campus. And then from that point on, it was just building the lead, building the gap. So it was a strong weekend for Notre Dame, and he's definitely the highlight of it. That move, it cannot be underestimated how important that is for not only the program, but for Al Washington and his perception with fans as well.
You look at his recruiting ranking, and this is the type of player that Notre Dame has been after for a while, and they just haven't really been able to close the deal. Right now, you look at his ranking on 24/7 Sports, he is the number 14 prospect overall in this entire class. So what sets Dunham apart from other defensive prospects in this class? Not just edge rushers, but defensive players as a whole. Like, what makes him elite in your eyes?
Yeah. The first thing that jumps off the tape when this is a really overused term around NFL draft season, so apologies, but it's on top of mind. Uh, his ability to convert speed to power. Coming off the edge, Dunham has a very quick first step. He's very quick at working to the outside shoulder and has the just like the raw speed and quickness to beat you going wide and still be able to, impact the play, get there quickly. But coming out of a speed rush, he has quickness to like cut back to the inside and use power to work through a double team, or the ability to play at length and kind of create a little bit of a gap between him and the tackle or him and the offensive lineman. So there's enough of like the speed and power combination. Just it's special. Like it's the best way to put it. It's unique to see a guy who can move that quickly and doesn't have any sort of like drawback with trying to move right into his bull rush or move into something more physical. Dunham is incredibly violent. Just when he makes contact in the backfield, when he's chasing down quarterbacks, when he comes from the backside on a run play, he is violent. He rips guys to the ground. He is not going to let you out of his arms. He is highly, highly adept at getting his arms around you, wrapping up, and making sure that he's going to finish the play. You don't see a lot of reps where Dunham's doing the things, throwing his shoulder and not getting his arms out, or just trying to hit with power and kind of, leaving the technique out of it. You don't see that on his tape. Everything comes from a place of being technically sound and building from there using his tools. And I think the last thing that really stands out about Rodney Dunham, when you look at, motor, we talk about guys that like, oh, they have good motor, they don't quit, they play through the shadow of the whistle. But Dunham's motor is more like it's crunch time, it's the fourth quarter, they need to get a third down stop, and Dunham is flying off the edge with the same intensity and speed that he did on the first play of the game. There's just a consistency in his conditioning that I think is pretty unique, especially for a position that rotates like that. But with a guy like this in high school, you don't rotate as much. So for a player of his caliber to be taking the snaps that he is and to be leading the defense the way he is, I think it's pretty impressive seeing his play in the fourth quarter. He just does not look like he gets tired.
He seems like a perfect fit for Notre Dame's defense, and he seems like a perfect cultural fit off the field as well. I also read that he's a pitcher too in baseball, and I was thinking how intimidating of a presence he must have on the mound. Like imagine being a sophomore in high school and then a dude who's 6'4", 230 pounds, who throws over 90 miles an hour at you. Like that guy is just a specimen. But he is not the only defensive line prospect that Notre Dame is after. We have talked extensively about how important of a position group this is for this recruiting class and pretty much every other recruiting class for the history of football. But there's a few other notable names in the mix. We know how big of a need it is. Who are some of the other top targets remaining on the defensive line, and what should we expect from Notre Dame's efforts at the defensive line position?
Yeah, I spoke with a source about this. I would say this was 2 weeks ago now. It's all blending together, but 2 weeks ago now. And I asked specifically about who are the guys on the defensive line board who you would consider like top of the board. We need to get them here, whatever it is. There were 5 names that came up. Rodney Dunham was the first name off the list. Beyond that, Elijah Golden from down in Sarasota, Florida, former IMG prospect, saw his ranking decline a little bit when he left the powerhouse school to go to Cardinal Mooney, but he's still an excellent prospect, very high on Notre Dame. Speaking with some sources around his recruitment, I know that Virginia Tech was considered like a hot name, at one point talking to people around him. I spoke with some sources around Blacksburg, and they don't seem to have the same confidence that folks in Florida do, which is interesting, just a little bit odd. And I also messaged a Michigan source, and the note I got back was, we're not sure how serious Michigan's actually being considered. Thought that was really interesting. Talking to Dunham, it always seemed like Michigan was kind of a top of mind program. So I like where Notre Dame sits for him right now. He connects well with the mission. I know there was some concerns about his academics when he first transferred to Mooney. Talking with people around there, that's been sorted out. Seems like he was just kind of behind going from IMG to Mooney and had to dig himself out of the hole, but normal transfer stuff. So he's kind of like the other big, top of the board, 5-star caliber name, even if the ranking is no longer around that range. The other ones that I'll list here, Tiki Hola, Ebenezer Iwatade, and Mikhail Blades. So 3 names there that Notre Dame fans should be familiar with. Of that group, I would say, Hola's been interesting since Chad Bowden left to go to USC. There's been some surge in momentum there for them. I think that between Notre Dame and USC, this thing is probably going to be kind of a a fist fight towards the end. That being said, Notre Dame has pretty much every box checked for Hola. They're going to get him back on campus at some point here for an official visit this summer. So I just think for, his side of things, getting him back on campus, we're not going to be able to really forecast before then, but it's worth noting that USC is trending. Mikhail Blade, it's an odd one. Notre Dame has set the pace throughout the entire recruitment. Honestly, they've set the pace so well, and talking with people around that recruitment, it seemed like, he had a lot of interest in other schools, but Notre Dame was just the one, right? It was just consistently out ahead. Speaking with sources around Notre Dame, there's not really a sense that he's close to committing. It seems like he's just going to keep gathering data. He still has kind of a roadmap ahead of him for what he wants to do process-wise to get this thing to the finish line. So he's not necessarily close. I still think Notre Dame's in the lead. I still expect them to be the favorite moving through this thing. But the reason there's not a crystal ball for me or anything is just even sources around Notre Dame are expecting him to take a while. So you just don't know what new data is going to enter the equation. And then Ebenezer Iwatade, I think when we last got together, he was like brand new on the board. He's interesting. He's a top 100 caliber player for sure. He's raw. It's the top 100 caliber player who you look at as like, yeah, probably a year two guy, but he's so damn quick off the line, and he is just really well put together. The concern there is Notre Dame tried to get out ahead of the SEC powers that are after him and kind of get him in the fold before they could engage. No dice. They engage pretty quickly. Georgia's heavily involved. I believe Alabama's sniffing around. There's a few other schools in the SEC. So there's going to be some battles for Iwatade at this point, but Notre Dame has done a very good job of putting themselves in a competitive position moving forward, even if they did fall short of their goal of kind of just removing him from the board early on.
Yeah, it sounds like the Derek Meadows recruitment all over again, where Notre Dame was in on him early before all the SEC schools got in, and then we all know how that happened. We're going to be right back with Eric in a moment to break down how new running back coach Ja'Juan Seider has already made waves on the recruiting trail. But first, I want to tell you about Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it is a complete financial command center. You could track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. I want to shift gears here to the offense because ever since new running back coach Ja'Juan Seider joined the staff, it seems like he's really hit the ground running, especially on the recruiting trail. And it's interesting, and you and I talked about this before we started recording here, how we all know that Dylan McCullough was a great recruiter. Like, Jeremiah Love doesn't come to Notre Dame without Dylan McCullough, at least in my opinion. But I think we can all agree that last year's running back class was a miss. They ended up with Nolan James Jr. in the 11th hour, which was great, but that was not a very good running back group, and this upcoming class, it didn't seem like they had a ton of momentum either, but things have really seemed to change since Seider joined the staff. So how would you describe his influence up to this point?
Yeah, it is interesting because you talk to, especially the 2026 running back targets, you talk to these guys, and they all have great respect and reverence for Coach McCullough. I think ultimately, when it comes to Coach Seider, there's just maybe a little bit more of a universal personality is, I guess, the way I put it. Like, he's someone that really just can connect with people all over the place, where I think McCullough was maybe a little bit more choosy about the guys he was able to connect with. They still got great talent. This is not an indictment of him, but I do think that personality wise, Seider's just probably a generally more approachable person from what I've been able to gather. Early on, it's tough to hit the ground running as well as Seider has. They've retained their momentum with a guy like Jonas Walton, who, didn't have a great a long-standing relationship with Seider at Penn State or anything beforehand. It's not like some of these other guys, like maybe a Brian Bonner, who he had known in that other role. They sustained that momentum. They sustained the momentum with DeZeff and Walker. I know that bringing on Seider, actually, he ended up committing to Miami earlier this week, but like for a guy like Javian Mallory, he was more interested in Notre Dame because Seider came here. He loved him. So there's been a couple like little feedback notes like that. But the most impressive thing is definitely the Osborne visit. Osborne looked like he was trending to Michigan for a while, pretty much since Tashard Choice left Texas. What was that, about a month ago, their running backs coach? It just seemed like Osborne was going to go to Michigan. And there was a point where it wasn't even certain that other visits were going to happen. And like, it was a lot of speculation, but informed speculation. And it seemed like it was going that way. And then, now that Notre Dame got him on campus and speaking with him, I mean, it made a significant difference. He told me point blank, I loved Coach McCullough. I had great respect for him, but I feel like what Coach Seider does as a coach, what he stands for as a person, the way he emphasizes playing young backs, the way he emphasizes using a stable of backs and trying to have 4 ready on game days, those messages have really connected with these guys. And especially for a bunch of blue chip guys who recognize the fact that they're about to enter this running back room when at least Jeremiah Love departs, there's going to be an opening. So for these guys who see themselves as this, elite caliber back, as they should, and are looking at, early opportunities, especially with running backs, being as likely as any position to leave after 3 years, just given the hits that stack up. I think a guy like Seider, who emphasizes that early playing time and who communicates that early in the process, it makes a huge difference for these guys. And I don't know that McCullough was as vocal about something like that. He would talk about, the best player is going to play and opportunities like that. But Seider specifically has a track record of playing freshmen. He did it with both Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. He has a track record of making that a successful move. And that's really, really, really resonating with these prospects.
Yeah, I think landing Osborne would be such a big deal because he is a top 100 player in the country. He's listed as the number 6 running back on the 24/7 Sports Composite. And the irony is that it's basically a battle between Ja'Juan Seider and Tony Alford, basically the top 2 candidates for the running back coach position at Notre Dame. So we'll see how that shakes out. I want to talk about the wide receivers here. You and I have talked about it a lot before, but since the last time we spoke, one of Notre Dame's top targets on the board, 4-star wide receiver Connor Salmon, picked Clemson, and the Notre Dame fan base became quite upset about yet another miss at the wide receiver position. But since then, it seems like they put themselves in decent position to bounce back with 4 stars Brayden Robinson and Kaydon Finley out of Texas. How would you rate Notre Dame's chances with both of those prospects?
Yeah, it's a good question. With Finley, I think it's high. Like I would say greater than 50%. And I know the crystal ball is currently in favor of Texas. His dad's a Texas alum. Like I'm not going to discount the Texas Longhorns given how strong their recruiting operation is and kind of some of the background stuff there. But from everything I've gathered, Finley is just like a Notre Dame kid. Like he's just wired that way. He has the profile fit. He has the priorities in alignment. And it's something where I think Notre Dame really pressed that with him early on in the recruitment. It's gotten to the point where he feels that way. He identifies that way. And speaking with people at Notre Dame, they talk about those conversations with him. So I do think that Finley right now is probably more likely to end up at Notre Dame than the field. Obviously, there's still a little bit of road to go. There's some other visits, but he's going to be on campus here this week. They're planning to make a big move with him. They'll have Jordan Faison, of course, Jordan Faison will be there. Dylan Faison on campus with him as well. Another commit to kind of not only build that sort of intangible connection, but also like you can pick the brain of the other guy and get a perspective, right? So that's going to be something that I think they're really, really going to lean on throughout his time on campus. The other side of things, Brayden Robinson. I'm a pretty positive guy. In my heart of hearts, I think I have a little streak of pessimism in me. I get nervous whenever I hear that Brian Hartline's involved with a wide receiver. I just like, he's so good at what he does, man. Like it's hard to bet against him. So I think Notre Dame is very well positioned for Brayden Robinson. Talking to sources around Notre Dame, I get a mixed sense of either like in the lead or right there in the lead. Maybe it's like a lead group, not necessarily one ahead of the other. I think some of that is just like perception, but Notre Dame's well positioned for Brayden. I do worry a little bit about the fact that he's not, and let me double check this before I say it, because there's been so many visits switching up that I have actually lost a bunch of them. His official visit is going to be on June 20th. Yeah. So he's not going to be there for the big June 13th to 15th weekend with like Noah Grubbs, Kaydon Finley, and a bunch of the other offensive guys. Usually last look is a good thing. So maybe I'm overthinking it, but seeing as like the week before is their big offensive push, I do worry a little bit about, the experience, quote unquote, of not getting in with all those guys, just that intangible push you can get from that. But I think they're well positioned to compete for Brayden Robinson down to the end. And I think it'll probably end up coming down to them and Ohio State if they want to take him.
The Brayden Robinson thing is like a double-edged sword, right? Because he's not even ranked in the top 300. He's only 5'8", 160 pounds, but he is lightning fast. So you look at his profile and you're like, man, he's a little bit undersized. Oh, Ohio State's in on him. Maybe this guy really is that good. Then it's like, oh shit, Ohio State's in on him.
Exactly.
Probably, like if they want him, I mean, they can just kind of have their pick at this point, given Brian Hartline's track record.
Yeah, and I told people on our board, the way I look at it with some of the rankings, especially this early in the cycle, because look, the rankings folks have a lot to do. It's a thankless job, and obviously there's a lot that goes into that. But when you're this early in the cycle, rankings are very much so just like almost about access, right? Like who have we known for a while? How has this thing been trending? And it takes real time to build out rankings for a cycle. So when I look at Robinson, the way I look at it is his specific utility of that high end speed. Okay, maybe in the national sense of the rankings at this point, they're not going to put him, top 100 or whatever. But for Notre Dame specifically, like that is a top 100 caliber prospect on their board. Like they are looking at it like we need that speed in the room. So there is utility there that I think is greater for Notre Dame in particular than maybe some of these other schools. But there's a few other guys as well that'll be here. Mason James will be on campus this week for the first time. Bubba Frazier, another speed guy, is going to be on campus later. So even with Salmon, God, he runs like a gazelle, man. It's so sad that he's gone. Even with Salmon off the board, there are still 3 elite speed guys who might not be like the ranked track prospects in the country, but they're still great prospects that are going to be able to add value there.
Notre Dame also had 4-star tight end Ian Pramer and quarterback Jordan Thomas on campus this past weekend. Both those guys are in the class of 2026, and they had defensive back Joey O'Brien on campus the week before. They've been working on O'Brien for a really long time now, but it feels like they finally started to gain some traction with Pramer and Thomas after their visits. What impression did you get about their time in South Bend?
I'll start with Joey O'Brien because I thought that one was interesting. Probably a week before his visit, I spoke with a Notre Dame source, and I was pretty blunt. I was like, look, it seems like he's come out and said that Penn State's his leader. Like, it seems that's the trend line.
And he's from Pennsylvania, by the way, too. I just want to...
Yeah, 215, represent. But yeah, so I mentioned that to Notre Dame, just put it that way. And I was like, all right, well, what are your thoughts? And the source I talked to basically came back and said, I recognize that stuff said, this is recruiting, it all is, a process, people say things. I think we have the lead. And the source said it with their full chest. I was like, well, he didn't say that, but look, you know better than me. Like, I'll take it for what it is. It's a data point. Coming out of the weekend, Notre Dame seems to have retaken the lead, and talking to that same source again, basically what I was told is like, yeah, look, like we talk all the time. We have consistent communication with Joey. There's obviously factors pulling him in a couple different directions, but I think ultimately when push comes to shove, we're going to be the ones in the lead, even if we don't get as much hometown exposure, whatever you want to call it. I just thought it was interesting. Like Notre Dame's been very confident. They're far more confident about their ability to land O'Brien than the industry has been for several weeks now. So I think that's a good note. And obviously coaching confidence it's all perspective, right? Everyone has their own perspective and is missing some piece of the equation, and you just kind of got to put it together. But I do think it's interesting that the informed perspective of the people involved here at Notre Dame is so strong. It's such a strong opinion. With Pramer, it's weird. He's a quiet kid, so he's not weird. It's just weird to kind of get a gauge. Notre Dame is probably in the top 3. They're in his top 5, probably somewhere in there. I would say 90+% chance they're surefire going to make that top 5. More likely than not, they're in that top 3. They could be in the bottom 2. No one really has a sense of what he's thinking, including my sources in South Bend. They feel confident. They feel bullish that they put their best foot forward. He's just a really hard kid to get a read on. So I I think that there's probably going to be a little bit of more of an emphasis on like the let stuff settle in, pause, and check back with him. Just because that'll allow him to collect his thoughts and do whatever he needs to do to kind of formulate those opinions. But Notre Dame made a move because they're so late on him and because of the influence of some other longer lasting relationships. I think you're probably looking at the field being more likely than Notre Dame for his commitment at this stage. But once again, that's just my kind of initial impression, judging as I can't really tell where they stand. Hopefully there will be some more clarity here in the next couple of days with him. But I don't think they're out by any means. I think they're going to be contenders down to that one to the last. But I do have a little bit of a hard time seeing Notre Dame fully realizing that comeback effort with him at this very moment, just given the fact that he didn't leave with them kind of in the lead off the visit, which tends to be what you want to see coming out of the emotional part of that, right? And then I'm sorry, the other guy you asked about, Jordan Thomas, was that? Okay, cool. Yeah, Notre Dame has consistently been, at or near the top for Jordan Thomas. I think that he's a little bit interesting because, obviously being a private sort of Catholic school kid in New Jersey, he's like such a good profile fit. He has profile offers. He's very much so in line with like the type of defensive back that Mike Mickens likes, right? He's 6'1", 185. I think his arms are probably actually even a little bit long, quote unquote, for his size. Like he plays long. He's got offers from some of the top programs in the country. I do know that, obviously Michigan has been a team that a lot of people have talked about for him. I think that it's going to be a little bit not tough to beat out Michigan and Penn State. I think Notre Dame is well positioned to do so, but it's a little bit tough for me to sit here and say like, oh, they have the edge over Michigan or Penn State, especially because Penn State's so local. And just to be upfront, talking with Jordan, I know he connects with like a lot of our national team a lot. I haven't had a chance to talk with him as much personally as I would like. So a lot of what my perception with him is kind of from afar. And then Ohio State is heavily involved. To be honest with you, given the board for Ohio State, I don't actually know like where Thomas falls on that. I know for Michigan, he's pretty high up there. I don't know where he falls for Ohio State. So I would have to verify that to kind of fully understand what their push is going to look like. But I think you're probably looking at those 3 Big Ten teams for him. I think Notre Dame is probably sitting right there. If you're going to call it a top group, I'm not going to call it 1 to 3, but they're right there in that trio. This one is really, I think, going to come down to the wire. I don't think this is a recruitment where you're going to see what we saw with Dunham, like, oh, I'll move it up and kind of make my decision. From my conversations with Jordan, he's a thoughtful kid. He seems process motivated. He seems data motivated. And I think he's going to take every opportunity he can to validate his impressions moving forward. Notre Dame is in a very strong position for that. But like I said, it's tough for me to say, oh, they're going to surge ahead just because I really don't know where he falls in Ohio State's board. And when they push for a DB, they are tough to beat.
Eric will be right back in just a moment to discuss his biggest takeaways from Notre Dame's Pot of Gold Day and how the Irish are making a stronger push for elite top 100 talent. But first, let's talk about Nissan. We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro-4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team plus the gear wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro-4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro-4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro-4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
We have not had you on since Notre Dame sent out a flurry of offers in the class of 2027 for their annual Pot of Gold Day last week. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts because I had a couple observations. Number one, offering 20 kids from California, well more than any other state, does not feel like a coincidence. And number two, it seems like Notre Dame might be focusing a little bit more on attracting the best players first and figuring out the academic and cultural fit later, which feels like a pretty significant shift in philosophy. So what were your biggest takeaways from Pot of Gold Day?
Yeah, the California thing is real.
That's
I don't
awesome.
think Notre Dame
I
liked
love
that.
that. That is so good.
Whether it was, I don't remember if he said he was going to build a wall or a fence or whatever it was, but whatever barrier he wants to build, I think Notre Dame is sending a very clear message. They don't care. Looking at the full slate of Pot of Gold Day offers, there were a couple things that caught my attention. One, they offered nearly 36 top 100 prospects. I know early rankings, like once again, it's incomplete, but to get that volume of top 100 guys and to offer 90 plus guys overall, that is a seismic change from what they've been doing recently. It shows, I think with the delay that they sort of had in February into March with kind of getting traction and getting things rolling, I think this shows kind of a forward-thinking effort to hedge against that in the future. They get in with guys early. They don't need to rely on this off-season period as their point of board expansion. They can have most of these guys in place, and then any board expansion beyond that, it can be a little bit less of a comeback effort, if you will, more realistic targets, profile fits, things like that. So that was interesting. I think that's actually kind of a forward-thinking strategy. In terms of the actual offers going out, like you said, I do think that there's probably a little bit more due diligence work that's coming after offer now that it used to go out beforehand. So some of it's just process change, right? Like ultimately, if you want to get these guys on campus and sort things out and really get that attractive interest in recruiting, the most proven way to set that first step in motion is to send out an offer. And Notre Dame has had a brand where they don't have to do that for a long time and they don't have to rely on that. But ultimately, if you want to increase your margin of error, Notre Dame can do that and still, kind of walk back those things if there's not an academic qualification or anything down the line, right? There's still runoff for that. So that's interesting. That was a key takeaway. They offered, I think, 4 or 5 kids in Mississippi, which isn't a lot, but for Mississippi and Notre Dame, that's pretty notable. I actually think they're the favorite to land defensive lineman from down there too. Sam Lejeune told me that Notre Dame was on top for him. So there was a couple interesting things like that, but the propensity of top 100 guys was interesting. I thought it was notable too, like looking at some of the offers that went out and kind of the way Notre Dame is looking at these guys. I was told by a source, around Notre Dame probably 3 weeks ago that when they're looking at 2026 was the outlook at the time when I asked the question, they're less focused about like, oh, does this guy play corner or safety or nickel? And they're more focused on like, oh, this kid is a defensive back who can help us. Let's sort it out later. You see that in this offer report. There's guys who are like listed at tight end who Notre Dame has evaluated at tight end, offensive line, and defensive end. I don't actually know what they're going to recruit these kids for, but it could be any of them. And there's a few cases like that where there's like some guys who are listed as corners that I know Notre Dame has looked at for safety and corner and a few things like that. So they're definitely moving the process around a bit so that the offer is a little bit more preliminary. And when you have this kind of event to kick off your cycle, right? Like you're building in something significant on the calendar and delayed from most of the sport in terms of kicking off this class. I think doing a wider net is ultimately going to be your best bet strategically, right? Like if you're already going to be behind the 8 ball in terms of timing and you're going to accept that, you're going to build that in strategically. What better way to hedge against that a little bit than making this Pot of Gold Day event like huge, than making it a massive swath of offers and covering as much ground as possible and maybe throwing shots at your old GM who's been talking trash. Like if you can do all of those things in one swoop, like ultimately the only thing you're doing is building more pathways for you to find success 6 months from now, 8 months from now, 12 months from now. So I think it was a great success for Notre Dame to look at what they did with the day. I'm really still like looking at the visitor or the offer list. I'm still kind of taken aback by just the volume of it. I was not expecting 90 plus. I thought it was going to be bigger. I didn't think it was going to be that big.
Yeah. I mean, now is the perfect time to capitalize. on all the momentum that they generated for themselves with that college football playoff run. And, got to strike while the iron is hot. Last question before we let you go here. We can make this quick, and it actually involves the class of 2025 because Notre Dame has 13 early enrollees on campus who are currently participating in spring practice after completing winter workouts. Are there any standouts from that group that you've heard about?
Yeah. Name that comes up most often is Jadon Blair. The length, the quickness at that length. It sounds like the physicality has really impressed folks around Notre Dame, which was kind of my key question with Blair, is that one rep, he looks like he's fearless and will take out anybody. And the next rep, it's like, he's a little hesitant there, wasn't he? So it sounds like he's impressed there. I know Ethan Long showed up, and I think folks were a little bit surprised by not even necessarily how tall he is, though I do think he showed up above his listed height. He's close to 6'3", but just how long he is. I think people were almost caught off guard by like, whoa, okay, you grew. Early feedback as well on the wide receivers. Antavius Richardson, learning curve is real. Never played wide receiver, kind of what we all expected. I have not heard a ton about Elijah Burris, but the things I have heard have been pretty much what you'd expect. My God, is he quick? He's great near the sideline. His feet are blur, things like that.
You are the leader of his hype train. So when he does turn out, we will have to go back to you and be like, Eric was right.
Look, even if I haven't heard about him yet, it's coming. It's coming. I know it is. There's no doubt in my mind. He's going to be elite. And then I've actually heard some good stuff about Jerome Bettis. It sounds like he's a lot quicker in person and in and out of his breaks. And just he looks a little bit more like, I guess explosive is the right word, than people were expecting. And then obviously a couple ones here I'll throw out as well on sort of the defensive side. Madden Faramo, awesome. Just feedback has been awesome consistently. Very physical. Looks good, still has the wrist wrap. Looks like he's working through that. That does concern me a little bit that he broke his wrist twice in 2 years. But hopefully, that'll heal up and we'll be all good here coming out of spring ball. And then Cree Thomas, guy that I really, really liked coming out of high school. I think he dropped down to 3-star ranking by the final rankings. He wasn't healthy for most of his senior year, which was really a bummer because in the beginning of the year and then in the very close, when you would watch Cree Thomas, the thing that stood out was his quickness. Dude is quick as a whip, like the defensive back version of Elijah Burris. In and out of his breaks, his back pedal, changes the direction. Everything is effortless. And when he messed up his ankle, I think it was like week 4 or 5, you could tell it just wasn't the same. It didn't look the same. It didn't look comfortable, honestly, as a viewer. And you saw it again at the end of the season. Early feedback on him at Notre Dame has been that quickness is back. And that's what Notre Dame is definitely going to want from their one early entry, freshman corner. They definitely want to see him, be able to hold his own here this spring. And quite frankly, given the, we'll call it athletic potential of Dallas Golden and what he can do, offense, defense, special teams, I have been quietly in the Irish Illustrated group chats, well, not so quietly anymore, rooting for Cree Thomas to ball out this spring and seize one of those backup spots just so they don't need to isolate Golden, especially as a freshman. I think it'd be very interesting to see how much more time they can give him to special teams. Maybe not offense, although that'd be cool, but specifically special teams. Let that guy return punts and kicks and get really good at it. And if they can build the defensive back depth around that, that's sort of the ideal thing here. So I'm really interested to see what kind of move Cree Thomas can actually make from that early good feedback. Because I think, Zachary's probably going to end up at the nickel. So if you're looking at 2 guys as outside corners, he's going to have every opportunity to solidify, being the lead horse from that group coming into the summer.
Look, I've been banging the let Dallas Golden play offense, punt returner, kick returner, you name it. I love watching him with the ball in his hands. But that's all we've got for today. Be sure to check out all of Eric's work on irishillustrated.com. It's really that time of year, man. Recruiting really ramps up, and then it pretty much stays that way all through about June up until that dead period. And Eric is a great source on all of it. So I always appreciate the time, man. And let's do it again soon.
Awesome. Always a pleasure, brother.
That's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow morning, Friday. Got some fun stuff in store for you then. Also, wanted to remind you one last time, please remember to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. And if you are watching along on YouTube today, I hope that you gave this video a like, or if you're listening to the pod, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and I'll see you tomorrow.